Hey everyone, Captain Jack here on Trek Central. About a month ago, I had the privilege of sitting down and talking with actress Amrit Kaur, best known to us as Cadet Thira Sidhu from the Star Trek Short Treks episode Ask Not. In this interview, we talk about her time on set, being a part of the Star Trek universe, and what it was like working with Anson Mount. Let's go. What led to your career in acting? So how did you get started, basically?
The first time I ever did acting was in grade 8. I was a lead in this play. Forget what it's called, but I remember when it finished, my elementary school teacher, my grade 8 teacher, he cried. It was about bullying. And I was like, oh my God, I really affected somebody. And that felt amazing. I continued in high school to do drama, but I wasn't, I had a strict family, so I wasn't allowed to take drama classes. So I did extracurricular. And I was just always really good at it. And the thing you know about strict families, and you've probably heard about brown families and Asian families, is they want you to become doctors or lawyers. So I thought I'd go into university, do drama. It would be super easy and I could go into med school after. But obviously, while I was learning to act, I fell in love with it. There is there was a show I did where I was doing assistant props. It was called The Dumbwaiter, and a bunch of my teachers were acting in the show, and I think it's a Harold Pinter play. And just seeing them have so much fun and seeing professionals do it for the first time live made me realize how intelligent it was and how experiential it was. And I just knew that I wanted to do that. And that was third year into acting school, which is, you know, what a lot of people are often are like, you didn't go into acting knowing you wanted to act. I think I knew somewhere viscerally, but until I saw that, I hadn't fully committed.
Excellent. That's a great story to know how you got started, really.
Yeah, I think before I saw people doing it very well, it was unfortunately acting was it was a way to feel more beautiful. It was a way to feel more attractive. It was a way to feel more popular. Even though viscerally I knew I wanted to become an actor, a lot of women and men go into acting because of insecurities and they want to feel good about themselves. And it wasn't until I saw people doing it professionally who didn't care about their vanity and their face, sharing their experiences on the stage, that I was like, I came to consciousness about what actually made acting tick. It had nothing to do with being pretty. But unfortunately, a lot of women and men struggle with that, and I still do. Like, wanting fame and wealth and all of these things, to feel better about oneself. But that's not actually why I do it.
We touched on a bit of this in our previous conversation. I think we might touch on it a little bit later in this interview about the pressures of basically we discussed a little bit about looking perfect in acting and the sort of pressure around young actresses and young actors on how they need to be perfect for acting. Would you say that's something, or would you say it's something you'd like to touch on again as we spoke about it previously?
Yeah, I felt a lot of pressure. I mean, when growing up, when I would say I wanted to become an actress, my loved ones, people that were closest to me, they would say, you don't look like, you don't look like a model. Maybe you could do like these art films, but no one's gonna consider you a lead actress. And I think a lot of that comes from insecurity because at that time, 15 years ago, there weren't many people that looked like everyday people doing work. There was people who looked like models doing work, and so that's what I thought when I got into acting. I went into pageants, even though I had no reason to be in pageants, just to feel better about myself. When I graduated, my first meeting with an agent was the agent taking my headshot, dissecting my face, and telling me that because of the shape of my nose, I would not be able to become a leading actress. I could only be a best friend. And that was devastating. that was devastating. And after that moment, I got so conscious about my face that I threw all my intelligence and training under the bus, and I was just focused on going into these auditions, trying to look like I don't know, look like some stick person, it's look like Caucasian, and I don't look Caucasian, So um, it was until I met Michelle Lonsdale Smith, who's my coach, and she was like, you were created a certain way to tell certain stories, and God forbid you change your face, because that would be a shame, because your story deserves to be heard. And she was coming from a place where she was also told to change the way she looked, because she was, she's a petite older woman who started acting later on in her career, and people told her she couldn't do that. So there's a lot of prejudice. And I remember we talked about this before. I saw I think a comment either on your video or another video. Somebody was like, oh, this cadet has a huge nose. And like 2 years ago, that would have broken me. But I looked at that and I laughed. And I was like, man, you have a distorted sense of who can tell stories on the screen. Yeah, I don't have a thin nose. I have a nose, an Indian nose. Get used to it. There are many people, different cultures on the screen, So that was a long response to your question. But
no, it's great. It's definitely interesting to hear, the sort of challenges getting to into acting. And like I say, I still find it unbelievable myself that, someone would say, oh, you have to change the way you look if you ever want to be, somewhere in the acting or acting industry. It's crazy, realistically.
It is crazy, but it's still, it happens. It's not a new story. It happens to many, many people. And especially, and I think women especially are not encouraged as much as men to lead with their talent and intelligence. And we need people to say that that's valuable and that's more important. So I'm very grateful to my coach, who always has encouraged that and doesn't give a shit about my face.
So I guess talking about intelligence there, let's talk about your character. We've seen the short trek Ask Not and the official description of Cadet Sidhu, but what's your take on the character? Who do you think she is and what makes her tick?
She's loyal. Her job means the world to her. She's devoted. I think she's someone who sticks to her morals and integrity. Integrity is huge for her. So even though she's in front of Captain Pike and she's crumbling, her integrity tells her that she has to stick by her principles. And she says, we must follow protocol. I think she has mentors, just like I have mentors. And it was personal for me that regardless of situations where you're always tested, and that's where the world sees if you have integrity or not. That's what I think. She's a woman doing her job. She didn't expect things to go astray. She's just doing her job, and she gets tested in the situation where she has to reveal her integrity and use it.
I think one of the moments you mentioned there, particularly one of our favourite moments on watching the short trek Ask Not, was the back and forth between your character and Captain Pike, played by Anson Mount, on the quoting of the regulations, which I think we called the Battle of the Regulations as a joke. I found that moment stood out extremely well, as everyone quoting their own regulation.
Yeah. Yes, we must follow protocol. Loved it. I loved it. My mom watched it, and her when I say the part where I'm like, please sit down, sir. Please. My mom's like, that bot. I love that bot. And I'm like, yes, Mom. I know. Thank you. I love it too. My mom is so cute. So CBS gave me 10 views to watch the short treks before I had another interview. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I'll send it to my parents and I'll send it to my boyfriend and my coach. And then my mom got it, and I only had 10 views and she wasn't conscious, but she was so excited that she used all the views. And then everybody else was like, I freaking looked at the link and there weren't any views left. And I was like, I'm sorry, man. I got a mom who loves me very much. It was very cute.
That is definitely a great story. So I guess following on to that as well, what was it like for yourself coming onto a show like Star Trek, a huge production on a franchise with such a long history, over 50 years now?
It was fantastic. It's an honor to be a part of a show with such a long history. And in Canada, when I got the part, my agent told me that it's the biggest set in Canada, and I'm looking to do more American work, but it's a privilege to be able to experience being on set in Canada on the biggest set.
Excellent. So I guess before playing Cadet Sidhu, did you take any notes from previous Star Trek like shows, or did you get inspiration from somewhere else?
Yeah, I had a couple of inspirations. So I actually had a coaching with my teacher, and also met with the director at the time, and we talked about inspiration. And I definitely watched the first episode of Star Trek with William Shatner, and just to get the vibe of the root of Star Trek, where it started. And then I looked at Discovery, but a huge influence as well was Emily Blunt's work. The director, Sanji, he encouraged me to look up Emily Blunt. So I watched Sicario. The blast scene, initially the take was it was influenced by, I don't know if you remember the blast scene from Sicario. That was the initial influence. It moved on to another direction, but that was the initial influence. I also watched Edge of Tomorrow, a bunch of cadet movies, just to see and just get it into my body. The feeling of being a cadet. So there were other movies like Full Metal Jacket, Taps, Looper, lots of cadet movies, lots of Emily Blunt.
That's great to hear. I love how, watching other cadet like stories to prep for your own one. That's like a great idea.
And another thing that was really important is because I'm a bit of a tomboy, so I slouch all the time. I have terrible form. I needed to practice sitting up straight, or I still look at myself sometimes in that episode, and I'm like, put your back straight. But yeah, that was it. And watching the cadet movies, it's like, okay, I gotta keep my back straight. And I was tasked. My task was a week of walking with my back straight, and it made me realize that I do not walk with my back straight, and I had back pain after that.
Setting some personal goals there.
Yes, definitely got some personal goals after that.
So the fan reaction to the Short Trek astronaut and your character has been incredibly positive. How did you feel about being accepted by fans and welcomed into the Star Trek family?
It was amazing. I had no idea that I'd get such a great response. I was very critical of my work when I watched it. I thought it was good. I thought it could have been even deeper. I would have liked to see more emotionality, and I'm working, there were takes where we did more emotionality or and other nuances, but there was stuff that I would have liked to work on. And I have struggled, and I've worked hard for a very long time, and it's very nice to wake up and you have, all of a sudden, you don't expect it, you don't feel entitled to it, nothing like that, and just have so many people responding to you. It made me very vulnerable, and it just made me feel like I need to work even harder to empower people. And the most nice thing was, getting comments from South Asian people as well, and messaging me and saying it was wonderful to see a person of color on the franchise, Indian descent. I don't think we have a lot of those on Star Trek. We're getting a lot of finally Black people on, and that was very touching and emotional. And there was one comment that really touched my heart. Somebody said to me, tweeted me, that they just watched the episode with their 8-year-old daughter, and they wanted her to see a role model of a brown woman. And that I teared up when I saw that, and I shared that with my loved ones, because that's my goal when I'm acting. That's my goal, that someone shows their daughter or son, and they're like, you can be a powerful woman.
That's great to hear. You think you've inspired, or potentially inspired, that young person there, and who are potentially going to go on and do some great things as well because of the work you've done on screen. It's fantastic when you think about it.
It's fantastic. Can you imagine? Like you're doing your podcast, and then some like 8-year-old is like, oh my God, Jack, I've always wanted to do this podcast. Now you're making me feel like I can do it too. It's like the dream,
It's so
you know?
crazy.
Like that actually happens. Sometimes I'm like, wow, and that means that I just have to work harder.
So I guess building on to that sort of question there, were you aware of Star Trek before shooting the short? If so, what do you enjoy about it?
Oh, that's a new question. I did know about I of course I knew about Star Trek before shooting it. When I got the audition, I was fan crazy and I needed to keep my feet on the ground and just tell the story. Um I knew it was a huge franchise, huge franchise. I know, if whenever I'd run lines for Star Trek, and you'd always know you're getting an audition for Star Trek because it's like they change the title to something else, and they change the character names to something random. And Star Trek is the only only production house in Canada that does that. So you're like, oh, I have a Star Trek, I have a Star Trek audition, and just that because it's so hard to access the sides and because they're so NDA about everything, it makes it amazing.
Hmm.
I knew it was sci-fi. I knew I love fantasy growing up. That's I was more of a Star Wars fan, but I didn't watch a lot of Western stuff growing up. I was raised in an Indian household where we didn't watch a lot of Western TV and film, but I knew it was huge, and I don't know what else to say. I knew it was huge, and it was great to be on it.
So I guess building on to that one as well, what was it like working with Anson Mount? Were you aware of his character of Captain Pike and its huge popularity? If so, do you think that adds more of a challenge or incentive to take on the part?
I don't think it added incentive to take on the part. I was grateful to get the part. There would be no reason I would say no, but it was amazing working with Anson Mount. I knew his character from the Discovery series, and I wasn't aware of how hugely popular he was until after, and seeing all these tweets about the Pike series, which is fantastic. And he definitely, without a doubt, deserves that, and I would be honored to join him on that. He was so he was so grounded and so open with everybody. He didn't make me feel like someone who was new walking into the set. He made me feel like a colleague, even though he's, much further along in his career. He was interested in my take of acting. He was interested in my process. He was interested in my schooling. And that was fascinating because, he was not conceited, and he has full liberty to be so. Nobody would tell him otherwise. But I also saw him, he was also very compassionate towards cinematographers and other crew members. Like there were times where the cinematographer, myself included, we would see that he's been holding the camera for so long, and Anson would take the courage and just be like, hey, I think the cinematographer just needs a few seconds. Can he put down his equipment? And that's a leader, because a lot of people come on set thinking that their job is the most important. Oh, I'm the editor, I'm the director, I'm the actor, but no, it's a collaborative form, and that's why he's so far in his career, because he knows that.
That's great to hear. Now, you kind of answered my next question here. I was going to ask, are you aware there's a huge fan pressure for a spin-off series with Captain Pike and his crew on the Enterprise? Is that something you'd like to be part of given the chance? I kind of already answered that, but tell me more if you can.
Yeah, sure. Yes, I'm aware now. I was not aware before. It's crazy, crazy. And I don't know that I've ever seen a page where there's been so much fan demand about a series. I'm also not that active on social media, and I hope to be more so. But I would be surprised if CBS didn't listen to the fan base. If I was given the chance, I would without a doubt work with Anson again. I think he's hugely talented, and I would love if there was more Indian stories that continued on Star Trek.
It definitely seems like, there's a crew being set up for the Enterprise in a way, because at the end of Ask Not, your character was introduced to the engine room, which looked like beautiful, to put it simply, and sort of like left to play in the engine room, which seemed like a great setup in a way.
It did seem like a great setup, CBS. I don't know. I can't say anything about that.
So I guess I'm still talking a little bit about filming. What was one of the biggest challenges for you during filming?
There were a lot of challenges, but I think the biggest challenge was keeping grounded throughout the whole thing. I knew how big Star Trek was. I was excited about being on such a beautiful set. And all of these things are kryptonite, they get to your head. And I had to keep on telling myself that it's about a story. It's about the story of a cadet who is so disciplined and in her job and loves her job so much, and her family is possibly about to die, and she's torn between these two worlds, about protecting her family versus being in front of someone she admires. That's a story that needs to be told, and I had to get out of my head of making it about myself. And the way I did that was thinking about the struggles that my own production company has faced, and the actors in the production company that I work with, and telling truthful stories and the backlash we faced, and how passionately I feel about telling truthful, artful stories. And if that group of people that I love so much were on the Bowman, what I would do. So I had to not make it about myself, because I so wanted to make it about myself, and I was so excited about the opportunity. So that was the challenge. There was a take where we did an emotional take, and I just, to get out of my head, I just looked at Anson Mount and looked at and thinking, went to the corner, and I just kept on saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. So I could just keep on thinking about my community and thinking about the people on the Bowman until action was called.
It's a great way to talk about it there and how you put yourself into that position. You're imagining it's your loved ones on board a fictional starship in this case, to generate and channel more emotion there.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's the way I had to do it. Otherwise, it's so easy to make it about yourself, and that's just dangerous because it has nothing to do with yourself.
I guess, the next question, this short track, it did manage to do a lot in such a short amount of time and really dug deep into your character. What were your first thoughts when you read the script for the entire thing?
I was in love when I read the script. I was absolutely in love. When I shot it with my colleague, I sat down on a chair and I was crying for so long, because I was like, finally, it's so rare you get good scripts. I was like, finally, I feel like an artist. I feel like an artist. I want to tell artful stories, and I'm so grateful. And I want the world to know that. And that's all I care about. And my colleague and I were like, yeah, let's put that on film. And so my audition tape is very much me vibrating in my love for acting and being very emotional. And that all translated with my love for the people on the Bowman, and being scared about this person who I also love, telling me, telling me that I have to follow him, which is scary. So I was very emotional. I loved the script, and we kept on working on it. Kalinda, Sanji, we worked on the script and editing it a couple of times as well to make it deeper. So it was fantastic. It was a fantastic script. If it wasn't a short trek, I think some people also commented there would have been even more space to go deeper and some of the nuances. Unfortunately, because it was just a short trek, things were rushed, but the content was absolutely fantastic.
It's interesting to learn that. I think a lot of other people commented as well, if anything, it's a shame it is a short trek in a way, because if this was like a whole episode, a lot more of the story there could have been dug into, the same as your character and the people that are affected. But even so, as a short trek, it still does super well in such a short amount of time.
Yes, it does. But that's true. It was as if you were trying to put a 60-minute episode in 10 minutes. So the highlights were in there, but I would love for the opportunity to come back and explore that character even more. She's a deep character, it's a beautifully written character.
I think I speak for many when we say I think we'd all love that if you came back as the cadet once again.
Oh, thank you.
So I guess if you could play another Star Trek character who's previously existed, or maybe a new character, who would it be and why? What do you think their story might be?
This is another thing. I was someone tweeted me and put in a picture of Lieutenant Radha, and she was in one of the earlier seasons, I think the first season of Star Trek, and it was a Caucasian person playing that character, but it's a brown character, and they put a bindi on her. It was a little bit of breakfast at Tiffany's vibe, where we have unfortunately people who are not the ethnicity playing the characters. So I would love to go back and see those Indian characters played by Indian people. But also I think Star Trek is doing that with writing this character. And the thing that's beautiful about this character that I played was that she was not Indian. She was just a character that I auditioned for. It was an open ethnicity character. And they just chose, they could have cast a Black person, Asian person, white person, and they chose the person who they thought could tell the story. And then they changed the name for me when they casted me. And that's the step forward, actually, that we're just people of all ethnicities are just playing characters. So I'd love to see, if I came back to see my character expanded and look at that story.
You might agree. I think it's one of the great things about Star Trek is it's such full of like diversity for everyone, and everyone can find some representation inside of the Star Trek universe, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, I think what I like is that there's been a move away from tokenization, and with the lead of Discovery being a Black woman, and other characters on the Enterprise being Black, and seeing Emily Cruz, she has red hair. She's a friend of mine from university. Just seeing people, void of tokenization, and Star Trek is really making a move towards that, which I respect and admire.
So I guess looking forward to the future as well, if you can answer this question, what's next for yourself? Where can fans look forward to seeing you next?
I'm doing, I just shot a series, a Shaftesbury series. I was a lead in that. It's a love story between two women, which is fantastic. They're still figuring out what they're going to make the name of that series, so I can't say the name, but it'll be coming out probably May, June. I also have another series called Little Wars that will be coming out May, June, and another movie I'm going to start shooting in January. So a bunch of stuff. So all you have to do is look me up and you'll find me.
We'll make sure to put your social media handles on screen now so people can keep up to date with yourself.
Yes, please. I have like 2 followers because I'm a new person with social media and have no idea how to use it. Literally, I woke up one morning, it was like I had 50 followers, and then all of a sudden all these amazing Star Trek fans are adding me, and I'm like, wow, that people like me, finally. Dream come true. Like the 6-year-old that got bullied is like, oh, friends. I'm just being silly.
I think we spoke about this a bit previously with social media, and the Star Trek community or fandom and the Trekkies, I think, are one of the most welcoming communities online. And we spoke about social media a lot before, but I don't know, from what I've experienced myself, and I expect you as well, the Star Trek community is just so welcoming to everyone who comes into the family, and they welcome everyone with open arms, no matter if you're another fan, a new actor or actress, a new community member. It's just so great.
Yeah, I did not know about that. I did not know about the term Trekkie, and people went to me, came to me afterwards, and they were like, you know that the Trek family is a thing, right? You know what Trekkies are? And I was like, oh, well, now I do. Fantastic. I guess I'm a Trekkie too. Go Trekkies.
I think, one thing the actors and actresses say is when you come to the events as well, you really get to, be immersed inside of a Star Trek fandom.
Oh, yeah, I imagine so. I imagine it's amazing. Just so many people coming together to celebrate. a story. That's just beautiful. So amazing.
So I guess one final question, which I think many of the fans are wanting to know, including myself. Who is your favourite Star Trek captain, besides Anson Mount's Captain Pike, of course?
Besides Pike! No! So when I was doing research, I watched the very first episode of Star Trek, and with William Shatner, I thought it was absolutely brilliant with him as Captain Kirk. He has the charm of Marlon Brando, I think, handsome, intelligent, manipulative, all in that episode. And I think it requires a lot of leadership and courage to start a franchise like he did. So that's fantastic. I have a lot of friends that worked with, I have a bunch of two friends, Hamza Haq and Gia Sandhu, worked with him on Indian Detective. And they also spoke about him being a leader on that set. So I would love, not only if I could wake up as Captain Kirk, but in this life as Amrit, to work with William Shatner.
That would be fantastic. What do you think? A big crossover that could be.
That would be amazing. Amazing.
Excellent. Well, I think that wraps us up with everything here. Thank you very much for taking the time to sit down with us today and talk about your character and everything Star Trek.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for being interested in my opinion and process.
I'm sure many are going to be delighted to hear your answers and get an insight inside the world of Cadet Sidhu. It's going to be great.
Yeah, keep interacting. Thank you.
And there we go, everyone. That was our interview with Amrit Kaur, who played Cadet Thira Sidhu in the Star Trek Short Treks episode Ask Not. It was super exciting to sit down with Amrit and discuss her time working on Star Trek, and like we mentioned in the interview, maybe we'll see her character sometime again in the future. We'll have to wait and see. Once again, thank you to all for viewing. I've been Captain Jack here on Trek Central. Don't forget, if you'd like more quality Star Trek content, you can subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. Alternatively, you can follow us over on our social media such as Twitter and Facebook, or visit our website for community updates. For now, I've been Jack, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.